Welcome to the 9th episode of Renegade Thinkers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that also features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today we're tasting Spring 44, Distilling's Old Tom Gin. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my temporary studio in Jupiter, Florida. Today, we're going to be taking a really close look at how CMOs are designing their marketing departments for today and tomorrow. Let's start by acknowledging that there has never been a more exciting time to be a marketer. New AI-driven tools are emerging every day that increase the likelihood that your media expenditures will be more targeted, that your messaging will be more relevant, and that you'll be able to track a lead through to the sale with 99% accuracy. It's also a treacherous time to be a marketer. Pundits like Gartner's Brent Adamson are questioning the distinction between sales and marketing, saying, do we really need that division? Maybe we should just have one marketing department. C-suite and investor expectations of CMO performance are rising, increasing pressure on achievement of really short-term revenue driving results. On top of this, brand has become a dirty word, and CMOs will go to great lengths to disguise brand building activities with euphemisms like corporate marketing. One CMO has cleverly called all of his budget revenue marketing to send a signal that not a single dollar is wasted on fluffy things like brand. So given these opportunities and these challenges, we thought we should focus this show on how CMOs are organizing their departments and how they see these structures evolving in the next few years. Our first guest is Kathie Johnson, CMO of Talkdesk, the cloud contact center company that raised $143 million in Series C funding last year. Kathie was also the star of episode 182 of Renegade Thinkers Unite. Kathie, how are you?
It's great to be here, Drew. How are you?
I'm good. Now, $143 million, that's big money. Has any of that trickled down to marketing?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Drew. Absolutely. What we put in our release is that the funding would be used to help grow sales, marketing, R&D, and the partner ecosystem. So sure thing.
Okay, so I am imagining that means more money means more staff, and I'm just wondering how you're thinking about your organization as you grow it.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Drew. I've been at Talkdesk 5 quarters, so not that long. The organization has grown threefold since I've been there. Yeah, I see your mouth. Crazy, huh? Crazy fun, for sure. But one of the things I really did intentionally is thought about what should my organization look like, not just this year, thinking about what I did last year, but for the future, and really structured it that way. I wanted last year to really be about build and this year to really be about run.
So, okay, let's talk about build and run. Help me understand the distinction.
Yeah, so last year organizationally, what I did is really focused on who are the talent, what that I need in my organization, what should the organization look like, not just for last year, but for this year and the year ahead, and really structured it that way. So if you were to look at my organization last year, you might have said, wow, it's kind of big for the company size you are right now. But I wanted to go through all of that storming last year during build. So this year we could just really focus on grow, grow, grow.
Okay, I get it. All right. So it's sort of like building a bigger net to catch the fish, so to speak. So you were building up this department. Give us a sense of how you sort of structure this relative to your remit to the organization.
Yeah, sure. So I am structured with 9 directs working for me. They're SVPs or VPs running some of the traditional organizations that you'd be used to, like demand gen. But if we lean into the intro you gave, I have a leader who runs brand, creative, events, and actually something called Talkdesk research. So also within my organization, I wanted to have some what I would call secret sauces. I built a research organization on my team within one of those organizations. I have made sure that I had support internally creatively, and I have a really large video team. That's something we can lean into. But I also have industry strategy on my team, Drew. So it was really important to me to not only be doing the marketing, but help drive the direction of the company as it pertains to our industry approach. And I also took on internal comms. So those are some of the things that are different. But if you look at it structurally, it's a brand piece, it's a demand piece. I've got the geo piece coverage. I have partner and customer marketing. Really everything across the board, right? To be able to do full funnel marketing, product marketing, sales enablement, competitive intelligence, the whole piece.
There's so many things that I would love to go into detail on we've got other guests that we need to talk to, but I want to, first of all, having a research group is such an insight and so smart. I mean, I remember years ago, DoubleClick was a client of ours, and they had this research, and it was a department, and they were able to crank out reports, and this was so important to their leadership of the category that they essentially created. I think it's amazing. Had you had one of those in a previous organization?
I did, Drew, and I felt it really important. And really, it's research, it's customer market insights. It helps drives our messaging, but it also helps influence the product, right? And then absolutely all of those thought leadership reports. If you want to be, my feeling was, if I wanted Talkdesk to be a leader in the market, we need to make sure we have that leadership content that we can put in the market.
So one question that comes up a lot, and we've talked about this in huddles, is this sort of artificial distinction between brand building and demand gen work. You mentioned that you divide those up, though. You do have people who are doing brand and quote demand, but isn't everybody sort of in some way helping to drive the business forward?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we have at Talkdesk is the V2M2, which is our vision, values, methods, and metrics, right? And we have it for the organization Talkdesk at large. We have it for marketing. We have it for each department in marketing, each person. Why this is important is when you look at answering the question of, does everyone help drive those? Absolutely. Brand is actually one of the top methods company-wide. Every single individual can touch the brand. Pipe. Building the demand gen also is a method across the entire company because everyone can touch that. It's not just a marketing play. It's not just a sales play. Okay.
Well, perfect. All right, let's bring on Anna Griffin, CMO of Smartsheet. Smartsheet is a public company that reported 50% growth in fiscal year 20 and projects 33% growth for their fiscal year 2021, which ends this month. Anna was also featured on podcast Renegade Thinkers Unite, episode 194. Anna, welcome. How are you?
I am great, Drew, and thank you for having me back again. I always love talking shop with you.
There you go. So you heard what Kathie had to say about her structure. Let's talk about your team and what's similar and what's different to what you heard from Kathie.
Yeah, well, first of all, you started the segment with growth. This is a company that is in massive, fast growth. And so when we think about our org structure, we've tried to go really growth in totality. We have some similarities for sure with Katie, but some areas different. Similar in that I think we approach the post-pandemic or the pandemic year and the post-pandemic year the same. And last year, if she was a build run model, similar in construct where last year is what I called our foundational model. So many of the things that you want to drive and get done when you are chasing fast, high growth requires foundational technologies, foundational kind of processes, and really, I have found integrated org designs. So that was our last year was get the foundation in place, and so then this year is about scale. Like you've got the systems, you've got the processes, you've got more integrated teams that can be on the same page, so you can scale with speed. And so similar in how we've thought about the years, and different though in the org design. And again, I think our org design and the way I've had to challenge myself to think about it was growth. And so really the first thing was how can we align marketing, like really know where the growth is coming from and what kind of growth that we want, and how are you going to get there the fastest, and could we align teams, primarily integrated, what I call campaign pods, that are directly aligned to like the growth trajectories of the company. How can we build integrated pods that run integrated plays across demand gen, sales motions, product announces, features, launches, and then ultimately, a brand. And so a lot of our alignment is, yes, my function has the classic comms and brand and events and digital marketing and, campaign marketing, at large. But in these pods, we really try to align, all functions of the company, so we can be really consistent and clear of, if we know that that's where we're going to grow, and that's the kind of growth targets and audiences that we want, how do we all go after it together? So things aren't happening in dribs and drabs, or we're going to run this play and you guys are going to run this play. And then when everything's running in silos like that across the entire organization, you lose the ability to kind of hit that growth with the kind of, speed and message and clarity and oomph. And so a lot of our focus this year is just, again, we're complete tight integration, so we can all go after the same thing together with more vigor.
Interesting. Okay, I think I understand. And is there a point where marketing stops and sales takes over? And because as you're talking about these pods, I'm thinking about a scrum where all they're getting together, and basically there's this moment where they hand off this brilliant lead, or am I completely misreading this?
No, you are. But here's the beauty of pods and that kind of integration. I would love for sales and marketing to never disconnect. I think everyone does baton pass offs. You get this leg of the race and then you hand it here, and then this lead, and then we take over, or you warmed this lead or we nurtured, and then now it's in our camp. I think sales and marketing have to be interlocked from the discovery into clearly the renewal. And that interlock has got to be, and that can only happen if you're working in this integrated fashion. Because if you ran your leg of the race and you passed your baton and you walk off the track and now other people are running their leg, you don't know how to optimize. And that's where sales and marketing, that optimization, there should be optimization that's constantly happening in maybe in SDR scripts, or in nurture streams, or okay, we're doing this, it's not working. Here are new ways that we can work together to optimize your part of the sales process. By virtue, they can go like, what, the customers are falling out here. Like, what can you do in the front part of marketing to better address, this barrier, this pain point? So, I love a world where sales and marketing are always integrated and not doing baton pass offs, but that's how I think you get a really, really good customer experience.
Okay, great. Well, let's bring on Melanie Marcus, CMO of Surescripts, a healthcare platform that connects patients and customers with medical professionals and products. And speaking of patients, Melanie, thank you for your patience.
No worries. This is great. Thanks for having me, Drew.
It's nice to see you. And you now heard Kathie and Anna's org structure. I'm curious how yours matches up or doesn't.
Sure. No, I love the theme of growth. That's why we exist, right? So Surescripts is a business-to-business organization. So we're selling business-to-business. I've been here for about 4 years, and I kind of spent the first 2 years building the marketing organization, and the last 2 years has been all about running fast to grow the new portfolio. And it's quite a ride, and keeping up the capacity of marketing to constantly match and potentially stay a little bit ahead, as Kathie talked about, I think is really important, because it's the growth part of the growth engine. The way I've structured it is it's the traditional upstream, downstream, but really with strategic marketing at the front, made up of product marketing. The product marketers are really focused on collaborating closely with our product innovation team, and then segment marketers who are embedded basically in the sales team. So they're close together, and they work together in the same department under the same vice president, setting the strategy that's going to grow a product in a market. I have a brand and content team that includes my own kind of internal creative agency, which has been really, really great, and editorial writers who do similar things to what Kathie was talking around thought leadership. Our site is called Intelligence in Action, similar idea, really important to our strategy. Whole events team, interactive marketing, and then I do have customer experience. And that part, that has come more recently into the marketing team, and it is a really great kind of combination. Brings us closer to the customer, closer to the sales team, and it's been a great experience.
Well, what I love about it when the CMO gets to own customer experience is that you also have that sort of direct line. You feel the pain when they're unhappy. You know about it, and often you know about it first, which I think is so important. It's always been the CMO's responsibility to be the voice of the customer, and I think it's really hard to do if you don't have own CX. Okay, so. Is there any area in the last year that has been easier to get headcount than others? Just curious.
Easier. So in the last year, I've been more status quo. What I will say, probably a better answer to this question, a more helpful answer, has been, in the early stages. I mean, I've doubled the size of the marketing team since I've been here. In the early stages, it was a different story. The marketing team was not sized appropriately for the growth that we are projecting. So that was one story. Now the story is really about, there are situations where we find ourselves using agencies or contractors for extended amounts of time to supplement our capacity to help grow. And when that happens for an extended amount of time that actually looks more like staff, that's when I say, all right, it's time to do an in-source, outsourced, analysis, and use that analysis to look for, if this needs to be a headcount. And that's just been a strategy that we've used pretty effectively. Got it.
Okay. Well, let's bring Kathie and Anna back. But first, I need to do what I always do on this show, which is see, Alexa, what is organizational design?
I have one definition for organizational design in the context of economics, a formal methodology that identifies dysfunctional aspects of workflow, procedures, structures, and systems, and then realigns them to fit current business goals and develops plans to implement change.
So there you go. Identify dysfunction. We haven't really talked about identifying dysfunction, but I would imagine that does come up a fair amount as we're doing this, right? I mean, when you took the reins, there was probably dysfunction. Let's talk about that in the context of COVID right now and the pandemic. What were some of the things that you had to change in this last year as a result of the pandemic? Anybody want to grab that one?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to start that, it wasn't an org design change so much as an org communication change. The marketing organization, we work together. Cross team collaboration is, one part of the team can't do the whole job of going to market for an entire product. So it has to be across the whole team. So we're an agile team. We use a lot of stand-up meetings and so forth, and we actually take time out to talk about what's working and not working. The one thing that has been useful is one thing I did today. With my vice presidents, we've installed a walking no agenda meeting where we literally just put our headphones in and go outside if it's warm enough and walk around and just talk like what we would do in the office. But of course, this time it has to be scheduled, but that's the only thing that's different, right? And that's been helpful.
Interesting. And Anna or Kathie, from I'm curious as we, a lot of you had big events teams, I'm imagining, and now you had to put them somewhere. Just curious, how did that impact, what, as you think about your plan for 2021 and beyond? I mean, where are we right now when thinking about event staffing?
I
Yeah.
can jump in on. Oh, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Okay, great. Yeah, it's true, Drew. When COVID hit, we did reposition people in events organizations, really look in the event organization, looking at where their strengths were. One person became an ABM person, for example. But then we also started doing two different things. One, we started investing in geo-specific folks who were doing what I would call pipe acceleration activities. So how do you, once you've generated the pipe, how do you help accelerate it through virtual events? And then really, our live events come back the end of June. Big question mark. Will it really happen? But so I've been rebuilding the events team specifically for both virtual events, but also live events that right now we're targeted the last week of June for our first live event in Vegas.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I would be ready to send my team.
I'm with you. I'm not sure either.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. It's just a little too close, particularly if it's international. Fascinating. By the way, Julie Kaplan, thanks for your shout out, saying that CX is a great way to align all the teams. I completely agree. And two of you mentioned CX as being under your responsibility. And I'm just going to sort of highlight that as so interesting and such an area that you don't always get. And is there something that you sort of had to do to earn the right to get CX? As in customer experience, folks, if you're listening. Anybody want to answer that? Don't be shy.
I think deliver and be, deliver first of all, and be aligned with the customer group or our sales team. Be really aligned, and have a good, my colleagues in product and in the customer group are great relationships with them. So, I think that's the key.
Okay.
Alignment and yeah.
All right. So I'm going to actually take a second here, and if you don't mind, I'm gonna plug CMO Huddles just for a second, and I like to talk about it particularly on this show. CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described a huddle as a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. Kathie, Anna, Melanie, does that sound about right?
I'd say that's pretty close.
So if you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com. All right. So let's talk about, we're in growth mode, we're hiring, we built up this big staff. Was there an area that was particularly difficult to staff for versus others?
I think I think marketing ops is interesting and expanding, because so much of growth and integration requires the operations to hi honey, husband Sam, to be able to run smoothly. And so you think about marketing operations and what it takes to really run things smoothly. It's all about data strategies, because it's the data and the insight that has to be actioned, has to be surfaced and then actioned to get you to the next step. And so I think finding marketing operations people and that's where we're putting like our data science function, our analytics function. I feel like there's lots of headcount in the world that everybody has a data science name in their CV, if you will, but the ability to really know how to connect that into marketing flows and actions is a bit of an art, and I think those are harder to find people who really know how to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our huddlers Rebecca Stone from Meraki Cisco has worked with the same head of marketing ops in 3 of her positions. I mean, just brings that person along with her, which is seems to me quite genius. I've also heard, and this has come up in huddles a lot, is it's very difficult to find product marketing people. I'm wondering if any of you have shared that challenge.
I've seen that a little bit, Drew, but for me, the hardest has been the industry side. I have both industry strategy and industry marketing in my organization. And, hiring both of those roles really requires that perfect sweet spot. Like if you're hiring someone for industry marketing and retail, you want them to have worked at Gap. You want them to have worked at a SaaS company in product marketing before. You want them to have a cultural fit. There's so many pieces. That although the PMM role can be tough, and I agree with you, Anna, ops can be tough, it's the industry roles that I find really hard because there are fewer, people to select from.
And just so I understand, the industry role, this is a person who's an expert on a vertical market?
Yeah, so I have strategists who are really driving the strategy for the company by industry, and then I have marketers who are really building that business, the awareness, the pipe gen, everything around it, the thought leadership, tied to each of those industries.
So they're kind of like category. I mean, they sort of function as they have a specific target, which happens to be an industry, and they're responsible for the plays that go out to those. Interesting.
Yeah, defining the space and building the space.
Building the space. And of course, hopefully the research is informing the work that they're doing there. That's it. Okay. That's so interesting. So what about, Anna, any areas that have been challenging as well that you're going, oh man, we just got to train? Sometimes it's easier to train someone than it is to hire someone with the experience.
Yeah. I think it's, everyone talks about, and I love it, by the way, T-shaped organizations. And I think that is so true and necessary in marketing. The way marketing has been organized for a very long time is you've got functional specialists, and this is the team that does this, and this is the team that does this. And you can get really good functional experts, but I'm finding that ability, to have experience to go across the entire organization, which is what marketing does these days. So the second that, everybody in the company became a content creator, it meant everybody in the company in a way became a marketer, which meant marketing and the role of marketing has somewhat changed forevermore, because you have to kind of span, cross-functionally. And so I think sometimes it's difficult in a world that's orientated as functional specialists to find the people whose mind and skill set and application of their skill set can scale horizontally across, influencing the rest of the company. So I find that to be a challenge. And to your point, that's kind of where you have to go in and then do more training or teaching versus, just people who know how to think that way already.
Right. And that's really interesting. And that speaks to the need for rotations, the need to sort of move around. And I wonder, as you're building these functions, if you think about that, I mean, Melanie, I think you said you've had 4 years there. So in theory, you could have had rotations of people moving around and gaining. And how is it?
But yes, but we haven't had that as much as we would like. But we are actively talking about it right now, because we're at the point where, and we're doing a lot of work across the team around career paths, career journey sharing, to make sure that our earlier stage, team members all understand that the path isn't straight. The path has to be. It's not just, it has to be a moving around, because you have to have all those new and different skills and it may be that you're moving around, not just in marketing, that you're moving around to other parts of the organization. I mean, sales, right? Or strategy, right? Kathie, I'm sure you've had that kind of experience before taking it on, right? So you have to have those other varied experiences. And so we're talking about that a lot in my team, identifying new people who could be put up for another position in another part of the team. It hasn't happened yet, but it's always a goal.
Well, now speaking of moving, this is the moment where we need to move the show on to the gin tasting. So we're going to run a video. I'm going to go to my freezer. I'm going to grab a bottle of the Spring Hill and we'll be right back. So stay with us. It's a funny video.
When we asked Reebok to send us Terry Tate, some people thought we were crazy. But I'm a firm believer in paradigm breaking, outside the box thinking.
Hey, buddy.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%. We're getting more from our employees than ever before.
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard! That ain't new, baby!
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice!
But what's really impressed me is how Terry's become part of the Felcher family.
You get high, baby!
He fits right in here.
That's a long distance call, Doug!
To be honest, I wish Reebok sent us 10 Terry Tates.
You wanna play games, Gene? Well, when it's game time, it's pain time, baby! Woo!
All right, we're moving on and we're back. Well, there won't be any more tackling on this show. We are talking about Spring 44 Old Tom Gin. And first thing you'll notice is this is a very tall bottle. Now, if you've never had an Old Tom Gin, it's really kind of cool because unlike all other gins, Old Tom gins are barrel aged. Spring 44 uses Chardonnay barrels and calls theirs the love child of gin and whiskey. And a fun fact, the original Tom Collins was made from Old Tom gin. Okay, so first, one thing you will notice about an Old Tom is the color is very different than your typical, right? Ladies, it's a little bit, yeah. Oh, you have the tasting, the smaller, but also cute. So let's get into this. So first, we have this different of appearance. It's so yeah. What do you think? It finishes like a whiskey, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it's like it tastes like scotch.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now,
I guess if whiskey had a baby, if gin and whiskey had a baby, it would be scotch. So maybe
exactly, it would be this, and it's got that sort of that finish. But all gins, by definition, have to have a dominant juniper, and you can taste the juniper, but that barrel aging sort of pushes it sort of almost to the side. I don't know if you can smell anything or pick up any of the other botanicals.
I don't know. I smell licorice.
Exactly. Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, I know that there is something in there that will give that twist. I know that there's lemongrass and grapefruit peel, rosemary. Maybe I think the thing that's the licorice is that toasted coriander. I'm just guessing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this is fun because sometimes they toast the coriander, sometimes they don't. And in theory, there's this slight floral twinge that you might take. Now, one of the things we like to do is talk about the botanicals, and there's a botanical called galangal root. So, hey, Nicole, what the heck is galangal root?
Well, galangal root is a spice from Southeast Asia, and it's closely related to ginger and turmeric. And a fun fact is that during the medieval period in Europe, the dry galangal root was used for protection against evil spirits.
Well, this is kind of cool. Now, are people using it today for anything too?
Oh, we don't know that, but I mean, you might by taking the shot.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Nicole. All right.
Evil spirits. I like that. I might have to hang on to this.
They might be using it in the new vaccines, maybe.
Exactly. Well, actually, there are in some of our research, there are some folks that are using it as a nutritional aid, the galangal root. But all right. Well, if you have any more comments on this, I have to say the whiskey finish is just it kills me that this is a gin that is so sippable. I love that. All right, I want to thank the folks from Spring 44. It's delightful, right?
Absolutely.
Cheers. Thank you. Okay. All right. Silly thing. Thank you for that. All right. Let's get back to organizational design and get in the spirit of organizational design. One of the things that comes up in huddles a lot is this whole BDR and SDRs, the brand development reps, and where they sit and where should they sit. And there's an argument that I've heard some CMOs talking about. We need to own this because we're the ones who develop we got the lead in the door. We need to develop and nurture it so we know that when we really do hand it off, it's a real deal. Where are you all in terms of BDRs and SDRs, and if any of them report to you? So raise your hand if they BDRs, you have them and they report to you. Not happening. So neither one of you. No. Fascinating. Okay. So have you in your past, in your careers, had them report? And so what are the advantages of having them report to you? Kathie?
Yeah, from my perspective, part of it is speed, right? And being able to really build it as part of your overall campaign activity and ensuring that you're doing it all the way from the initial touch, all the way through the qualification process. Can be an advantage. Given that, you could have this argument, is it some of it just, where does your job end? In this, at some point, you just have to let go of some things. I think that's a really good point, Drew, because you're right. At some point, it does end. It can either end before the SDRs or after the SDRs. And, at Talkdesk today, the SDRs do report into sales, but we have SLAs across sales and marketing and SDRs. So we have aligned on definitions, we've aligned on process, we've aligned on, what we pass over when. So it works fine. I think if we didn't have the relationship, the definitions, the SLAs, there probably could be challenges, but it can work.
Just in case there's some folks that aren't in marketing listening to the show, what's an SLA?
Thank you. Sorry. Service level agreement.
Service level agreement. And what we're really talking about is you as the marketer are making a commitment to the sales organization that you will deliver a quantity of leads that will turn into revenue.
And their commitment back to you on what is for SDRs, we have a commitment, what has to be responded to within 30 minutes or a day or 5, whatever you put in your SLA, it's a two-way agreement. It is not a one-way agreement.
Okay, that's really important. So Melanie, Anna, do you have SLAs with your sales teams?
We do. You care about if you're, producing and investing energy against demand and lead flow. You want to make sure the lead's going to be followed up on. So you do want really tight SLAs that kind of guarantee, priority and urgency, across urgent and prioritized leads. So yes.
Okay. One of the things that didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago was marketing ops, right? And let's talk about, first of all, just how many technologies do you currently have in your marketing stack? So let's just start there. Over 25? Let's start there. Who has over 25? Kathie's nodding her head, Anna, all three of you. Okay. So now the rule of thumb used to be that with every technology that arrived, that there's a certain amount of headcount that would go with that. So if you have 25 folks, 25 technologies, you have at least 25 people on your marketing ops team. Is that anywhere true?
No, not even close. No, but nor is it necessary, because you also have to think about when you're investing in MarTech technologies, you're expanding it across not only marketing, but across sales. And so there are other, across BI, analytics. So there's other, distribution, but I think you want to synergize a MarTech strategy under marketing ops, but then you need to make sure the strategy is being, operationalized and connected into Salesforce and blah, 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 which connects you into other ops functions across the company.
So same thing. Yeah. Let's talk about this a slightly different way, because one of the things that notice is that there are some technologies that you have that are underutilized. that may be understaffed, to take advantage of them. One of you mentioned having a culture, a content culture where everybody's right. Well, that has to feed the marketing machine, and you get a marketing automation software. You got to fill it up with stuff. And so that's staffing that I'm thinking about. So I guess the question is, how do you have a sense that you're properly staffed for marketing ops? When do you know? What's it, and how do you know that?
I think the way we've approached it is we try to identify. We kind of look at all marketing kind of sales moments in the company, and we have a council we call the Global Marketing Council, and we come together because marketing can sit in lots of pieces and parts, and it just depends on how organizations define and align things. So the goal of a Global Marketing Council is to pull anybody who's kind of touching customer, prospecting into customer relationship into one organization. And we sit there together and we kind of start identifying where are the pain points that we're having. Like, okay, marketing automation, it usually comes up, because everybody uses it slightly different. It can be utilized in sales. It can be utilized in product. It's being utilized in demand gen. It's being utilized in a variety of things. And so the way that we kind of look at what should marketing ops have is by virtue of looking at the joint problems that we think we have to jointly solve to be better together. And then you start kind of tackling those problems. And I find that those usually kind of sit at the heart of marketing ops, and because they kind of become that forcing function of either, integration or solution building or solution connecting to solve those problems. So, and then the more problems you decide to solve, the bigger the marketing ops function gets. So that's our approach.
Well, and as you were talking, Anna, what made me think, and I want to open this up. So, what does a leader do? A leader sort of sets where we're going and then allocates resources, right? And so as I'm thinking about, Kathie, you mentioned you had 9 direct reports, right? Each of those folks could be saying in your office every day, virtually or otherwise, and saying, I need more staff, right? Mm-hmm. And they could, and in fact, they all should be, because they should all be saying, our department can drive the business forward. Therefore, we need more resources, whether it's more technology or more staff or both, or a more budget, right? And you want that somehow. So I guess the question as a leader, and getting this back to sort of organizational design, is, are you constantly looking at where you're investing your dollars and resources as from a headcount standpoint, and saying, these are the ones that align with my remit to the organization? And just help me out here. I feel like I'm onto something, but I need your validation.
I'll jump in on that. As I mentioned, Drew, we have what's called a V2M2, Vision, Values, Methods, and Metrics for the company. And then we do it for the organization. So we do it for the company, and then I do it for marketing. My organization then is built in alignment with what those agreed upon methods are, because they're all done in priority order, and they each have 5 to 10 metrics underneath them, which have commitments of delivery and dates, right? So everything is very measurable. And I ensure that everyone across the leadership team and all of our key stakeholders, like every one of my leaders knows who their key stakeholders are, right? We create those formal relationships. All of those people review it as well. So once we've done that, then we know what our organizational needs are. And then I use certain ratios that I feel are important in terms of program spend to headcount spend, or marketing and field relationship to the number of bag carrying AEs. So it's sort of a start from the strategy piece. What am I trying to develop? And then at the ground level, what are those ratios that I know need to be there for us to achieve what we need to achieve?
And that helps me a lot. And I'm thinking about these ratios. And Melanie, do you have ratios? Because you were talking about this balance of having in-house people versus outsourcing and so forth. And where does it, what are these rules of thumb that you're thinking about for organizational design?
Yeah, well, I think about ratios too. One that isn't so scientific, but it is definitely practice. And it proves to be true, I think, in practice, is the spend on staff versus the spend on programs. You can't have them out of balance. If you get to be under 40, 60, either way, you're not going to be able to spend all the money, and you're not going to be able to keep your team, keep your team busy enough doing what they need to do. So there's like a spend to staff ratio. And then there's definitely the staff, keeping the staff load balanced across the functions is tricky. We are working right now to actually, we're an agile marketing team, I think I said, and we're working right now to look at our capacity and actually look at where do we get tripped up on capacity. And before we say that means we need new staff, to look at what actually is in the pipeline and make sure it's making a difference, because that is, also an issue. So once we've got that figured out, then I can go, okay, we can't add more strategic marketing until we have more content, or we can't add more content until we have more interactive. But it's all a load balance issue.
Fascinating. And I'm imagining there's also some sort of notion of how much you spend, a ratio in terms of out-of-pocket expense for technology too. You don't want that number to go crazy. Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful to me to get a sense of this. And one of the things that I'm going to glean, and we talk about this in huddles, is that if you're not delivering on your pipeline commitment, none of these conversations are fun. But if you are delivering on your pipeline committed, then we can have this conversation, which is, I think, is such an important part of being a CMO, is that we could spend a lot of time talking about brand, but if pipeline, you're not there yet, you're not going to get that conversation. All right, this is the moment in the show where I get to ask, what would Ben Franklin say? And I know that sounds silly, but he is sort of a mentor of mine. And I think he would have something to say when it came to creating an enduring organization. And he might say, look before, or you'll find yourself behind. And if you think about this conversation that we've been having, it's very much about planning for the future so that you are not falling behind. All right, well, speaking of this, it's hard to have a conversation about organizational design today without talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm wondering if this has been on your mind and part of, as you think about going into the future and looking before, thank you, Dr. Franklin, what is DE&I, or as the folks that do call it, it's JED&I, or JEDI, as J for justice. So, okay, how is that thinking? Who wants to go in and dive into that one?
I'll jump in.
Thanks,
when you think about DEI, I think about it in two ways. Number one, as a marketeer, you want to make sure that the work that you make is diverse. Like that it's diverse in its thinking, it's diverse in how it shows up in the world. It's a reflection of your brand's diversity by virtue of what you make and put out into the world. And so it's interesting, because we actually use our own product to do this. You can only make, usually I find, diverse work, or work that is representative of who you are as a company, by having diverse people work on what you make. So the two are linked. And that ability to look at resource pools and assignment of teams, and have you assign the right kind of a diversity and experience mix in assignments and team mix. Of course, we use software to do that, but then you can actually use software to then go, then how do those teams perform? How does the work that they make actually reflect the diversity of the company? And how does that work actually perform in market? And the ability to kind of do all of that on a platform, what we do, but there's lots of ways to approach this, is huge, because you are immediately aware of how diverse. If you know that you can't have a diverse end product unless you have a diverse team, then you're already naturally aware of the type of diversity that you have to bring into the organization. And so, I just think connecting it to what you do, to what you make, and that those things are linked is critical. And by virtue of that, it makes you very aware of, do you have the right mix of team, talent, age, ethnicity, the whole thing, experience set in creating ultimately what you make. And then that forces you down the hiring path if you find that you're not able to put together diverse teams.
So I'm curious, Kathie, Melanie, what kinds of things are you doing to make sure that your teams don't look like the four of us?
I'll weigh in so we're the number one thing we're doing right now is talking about it and making sure that we raise awareness within our own team, from the data around our hiring, around our qualified candidates, and then working with HR to figure out, like, how do we make the job descriptions, expanded enough so that we get the right qualified candidates in, and that kind of thing. And honestly, participating in roundtables like this give me more ideas. So the conversation is really the important part right now. So ideas flow.
Kathie, anything you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. This is such an important topic for me personally, and I have a long way to go for sure. But really proud of some of the work we've been doing that we really rolled out just last month, company-wide. Talking about conversations, Melanie, I held at our company kickoff, sales kickoff, a conversation with a woman, Molly Ford, who's done a great tech talk on, she's a Black woman, and she did a great tech talk on, if you don't have a chair at the table, using Shirley's quote of bring a plastic chair, right? A folding chair with you. So I held that conversation. I rolled out new values company-wide, in which DE&I is one of our core values. We added a whole piece within our V2M2 around DE&I, and we launched ERGs with the diversity, equity, and inclusion as one of them, and are starting our first equity DE&I talks next month. So we actually have a focused effort where we are bringing in diverse people for a conversation to really just bubble up that awareness, not even just within our company, but outside of our company as well. So we have a long way to go, but we've made put some good stakes in the ground just last month.
Yeah, that's so important. By the way, what's an ERG?
Employee Resource Group. And thank you for catching me on all of my acronyms.
I know I usually know, but I don't want to assume that the others do.
Yes.
Okay. So we're starting to get to the close of the hour, and I want to make sure that we're looking ahead to let's be optimistic and say the entire United States is in fact vaccinated by the end of May, which is now what they're talking about. And Kathie, you mentioned that you are thinking about events in June or July. Let's talk about how the organization may change as you go forward. I mean, how many of you expect to bring your whole marketing teams back to the office?
And we're planning for 50-50. We think it's going to, we've already given the option to, you're going to delegate. Are you going to be, 100%, in the office worker? Are you going to be a hybrid worker? Or are you going to be a remote worker? And the preference has largely come in as hybrid. And there are some functions who want to be in the office, and they thrive on that because they need, that human connection to better, execute their jobs. But in marketing, I think we're definitely going 50% of the team is going to be hybrid. And then we have to concentrate on how do you build new workspace environments where if you know that you're always going to be partially live and partially on a Zoom, what does that look like? Like you don't need closed necessarily private offices anymore. Like everything, and you can't really have open offices anymore because at some point you're going to be zooming in others. And so it's been a great discussion on work flow and work space design.
It's funny because I was talking to one CMO the other day, and he has a young staff. It's a startup, and he was just saying, "I want all my team back in." And I was actually surprised that. And this is a really quite a visionary a CMO. But when he said that, I went, oh, because we're all virtual and we're going to be that way. We have no plans to do that. And so, Melanie, I'm curious, where are you in that?
Yeah, we are really struggling with this right now. We being in person in an office, and we've got multiple office locations, is part of our culture. And it's part of how we think we create together, not just in marketing, but across the company. Our policy before COVID had been, work with your manager, but you can work from home like up to 2 days a week and that kind of thing. But as an organization, we're going through a process right now to figure out what does that mean, knowing that it's a part of our culture. So we'll see where this lands us.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of, and look, there is, as a creative organization, the one thing that is really, really missed is just being together, having this spontaneous brainstorm and just kicking ideas around. Everything is so formal, whether you're doing it on chat or doing it on Zoom. The opportunity for spontaneity is really, really hard. Okay, so that'll be interesting. It sounds like nobody is going to say, all of the employees need to be back the day everybody's vaccinated. Nobody has that policy because there are too many people. And by the way, I'm imagining that you've also broadened your horizon in terms of your employee base, because you have people who moved out and said, hey, I'm moving to Utah or wherever, or moving somewhere else. Okay, so let's talk about this from an advice standpoint. We have CMOs who are walking in to a new job, and they're thinking about their organization. What advice would you have? One piece of advice for them to really future-proof their marketing organization? Melanie, why don't you start?
Start with the business needs of the organization, and look ahead and start with the business needs of the organization and the growth needs.
Okay, so we're going to start with the business needs and growth. So if we have a high growth company, which needs a lot of leads in the pipeline then we need to staff accordingly. Okay, Kathie, what's your advice in that area?
So I'll agree with Melanie, but one of the things I like to add is, what is something that you can create in your organization that will differentiate you in market? So I think about the Talkdesk research that we added, right? So how can you bring something new that others aren't doing or might not want to do or can't do?
Yes, we just had an entire marketing conversation for 58 minutes and we finally got to the word differentiate. Thank you for that, because, oh my gosh, if we're not as marketers differentiating our organizations in general, then I believe we're failing. So Anna, one piece of advice.
Accountability. I would want someone to be super clear. What are they going to hold you accountable for? And again, every CMO, every organization has different views of how they think about a CMO and the function, but you need to be crystal clear on what are you going to be accountable for, because you need to make sure that organizational construct aligns to your accountability. It's going to be really hard to be accountable, but then not have really, the remit to get the job done in the other areas that don't sit in your org design. So clarity on accountability, and then design your org structure for that accountability.
I love it. And it's perfect. If we're not managing CEO expectations and C-suite expectations, we're not going to have a successful adventure. All right. Well, thank you, Kathie, Anna, Melanie. You're all good sports. Thank you, Spring 44 Distilling, for that fantastic Old Tom gin. And thank you, audience, for staying with us. So we had 3 fabulous women on the show. Next week, we have 2 men and a woman, and in 2 weeks we have Chip Rogers, Gabby Zeiderfeld coming on, and we're going to be talking about category creation. Okay, let's cue the music. Renegade Thinkers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Charlotte McAvoy. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes and past episodes, please visit renegade.com, home of quite possibly the savviest B2B marketing agency in New York City. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.